Old English language. Old English is the language of the Germanic inhabitants of England, dated from the time of their settlement in the 5th century to the end of the 11th century. It is also referred to as the Anglo-Saxon, a name given in contrast with the Old Saxon of the inhabitants of northern Germany. These are two of the dialects of West Germanic, along with Old Frisian, Old Franconian, and Old High German. Sister families to West Germanic are North Germanic with Old Norse, aka Old Icelandic, as its chief dialect, and East Germanic with Gothic as its chief, and only attested dialect. The Germanic parent language of these three families, referred to as a Proto-Germanic, is not attested but may be reconstructed from evidence within the families, such as provided by Old English texts. Old English itself has three dialects: West Saxon, Kentish, and Anglian. West Saxon was the language of Albert the Great, 871 to 901, and therefore achieved the greatest prominence accordingly. The chief Old English texts have survived in this dialect. In the course of time, Old English underwent various changes, such as the loss of final syllables, which also led to simplification of the morphology upon the consent of England by the Normans in 1066 numerous. Words came to be adopted from the French and, subsequently, also from the Latin. Old English itself has three dialects: West Saxon, Kentish, and Anglian. West Saxon was the language of Albert the Great, 871 to 901, and therefore achieved the greatest prominence accordingly. The chief Old English texts have survived in this dialect. In the course of time, Old English underwent various changes, such as the loss of final syllables, which also led to simplification of the morphology upon the consent of England by the Normans in 1066 numerous. Words came to be adopted from the French and, subsequently, also from the Latin. To make it short, Old English language, also called as Anglo-Saxon, language spoken and written in England before 1100. It is the ancestor of the Middle English, and modern English scholars place Old English in the Anglo-Frisian group of West Germanic languages. For me, the importance of Old English is that Old English has a history that proven significant for historical study. Preserving a chronology of early English history, English is a part of our universal language, and we need to study it in order for us to communicate with one another, either in other countries.
Good day, I am Edlimar Caleta, and I am here today to briefly discuss about the Old English pronunciation. In modern English alphabet, we have 26 letters from A to Z. Likely, back then in Old English, we have also 26 letters. But the difference is that there is no J, V, W, and Z. Instead, there are additional letters like win, torn, et, and ash. In pronunciation, we have monophthongs and diphthongs. Monophthongs meaning one sound, they are vowels like a, e, o, and e. Diphthongs, in the other hand, means two sounds. They are monophthongs that are joined together to make one sound or monosyllabic word. It is important for us to study the Old English pronunciation because it helps us to pronounce words and speak more naturally, and also to track and know the history of how the English language evolved through time. That's all, and thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Leila Argayoso from Abels 1. My presentation is about the vocabulary of Old English. At first glance, Old English texts may look decidedly strange to a modern English speaker. Many Old English words are no longer used in modern English, and the inflectional structure was more rich than is true. of its modern descendant. However, with small spelling differences and sometimes minor meaning change. Many of the most common words in Old and Modern English are the same. Words from Old English vocabulary are mainly found in literature and poetry prior to the Norman invasion of 1066. After this period, Middle English became the main representation of the English language before transitioning to the modern English we know today. Some vocabulary words they use are ansaka. In our modern English, it means enemy. Next is bidurin. In our English language, in this modern, is warrior. Next is beard, which is child or son. Bill as sword. Prim as ocean. Preos as priest. Sped as quickness. Keening as king. Ides as woman. Lufu as love. Lift as sky or wind. Wife as wife. World as world. You may notice that many of these words sound similar to their modern meanings, such as preos or prios for priest and world for world. It goes to show you that even 1,000 years later, may elements of language story the same. This is all my presentation in vocabulary of Old English. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Hias Hazel Galliano and I will discuss the noun cases of Old English. We all know that nouns are words that indicate a person, place, animal, thing, or idea, like thing, rabbit, camel, and Buddhism in modern English. But in Old English, they have three genders, the masculine, neither, feminine, two numbers, singular, plural, and five cases, nominative, accusative, genitive, dative, and instrumental. Note that the so-called genders were purely grammatical genders. They very often did not correspond to natural gender. For example, the word women is actually of the neuter or grammatical gender, not the feminine or natural gender. In Old English, nouns were inflected. They changed how they were written and spoken to add little bits of extra information to communicate their function within the sentence and the number of the noun, whether singular or plural. Although learning a language with three different genders might seem hard, it isn't really very hard. It can easily enough be done if we can just make sure to memorize nouns along with their definitive articles, because the definitive articles for each grammatical gender are unique. Gender. Old English still had three genders of Proto-Indo-European, the masculine, feminine, and neuter. Each noun belongs to one of the three genders, while adjectives and determiners take different forms depending on the gender of the noun they describe.
The word for stone is masculine, but the word for bean is feminine, and yet they are se stan, masculine, and se obean, feminine. More dramatically perhaps, the word weef, meaning woman, is grammatically neuter, and the word weefman, which also means woman, is grammatically masculine. That weef, neuter. Se weefman, masculine.
Cases. As in several other Old Germanic language, Old English declension include five cases: nominative, accusative, dative, genitive, and instrumental. Nominative, the subject of a sentence which carries out the action.
The nominative case mainly marks the subject of the sentence. In the phrase "se dwerg slepte," the dwarf slept, the nominative pronoun se and the noun dwerg are both in the nominative case. In addition, the nominative is used for direct address, as in "Eala, dwerg," which you might say if you encountered a dwarf in early medieval England. The nominative case was also used to mark the subject predicative, or the complement. That is, the complement of an intensive verb or a copular verb, such as to be. In the sentence, he is se dwerg, he is nominative because it is the subject, and se dwerg is nominative because it is the subject complement.
Accusative, the direct object that which is acted upon.
The accusative case mainly marks the direct object, as in the sentence, "Se dwerg loefde van een hond." The dwarf loved the dog. In addition, the accusative is used for the object of some, though not all, prepositions, as in "thurg van het toen," through the town. Those of you who've learned German will remember the lists of prepositions that go with either the accusative or the dative. All English is similar in this respect. Some go with the accusative, some go with the dative.
Genitive, the possessor of something.
The main function of the genitive is to mark the possessive. If we want to say that it is the dwarf's dog, we use the genitive form of se dwerg, thas dwerges, thas dwerges hond. In modern English, this genitive form survives as the apostrophe s, as in the dwarf's dog. Another frequently found use of the genitive is the partitive genitive. That is, a genitive form that is combined with a word expressing a number or quantity of things. For instance, rather than saying 7 dwarfs, the Anglo-Saxons would say 7 of dwarfs. Seavon thara dwerga. Other words that trigger the partitive genitives are words such as alch, each, alch thara dwerga, each of the dwarfs, and fella, many, many of the dwarfs.
Dative, the indirect object.
The main function of the dative is to mark the indirect object, as in our first example sentence, "Se dwerg gaf thon staan tham hunde." That is, the dwarf gave the dog the stone, or the dwarf gave the stone to the dog. In addition, the dative can also be used as a substitute of a preposition. That is to say, you often have to add a preposition like to or with when you translate a dative noun phrase. Which preposition you need to use often depends on the context. So in the sentence, "Se hond is tham dwerge leef," the dog is dear to the dwarf. Tham dwerge here is translated as to the dwarf. But in the second sentence, "Se dwerg sloeg thon hond tham stane," we want to pick with. The dwarf attacked the dog with the stone, not to the stone. Another frequent use of the dative case is as the object of prepositions. For example, to, tham, toene, to the town.
Instrumental, something that is being used.
The case that you may find in Old English is the instrumental. This case was already dying out in the Anglo-Saxon period, and its functions were taken over by the dative case. Nevertheless, you may occasionally come across the instrumental. If you do, the instrumental case, not surprisingly, indicates the instrument. That is, it is usually translated by adding the prepositions with or by means of. Se dwerg sloeg thon hond thu stane. The dwarf attacked the dog with the stone.
I'm Abigail Bendia and I'm going to talk about verb forms in Old English. Most academics classify all Old English verbs into 4 types: anomalous or basic, preterite, present, strong, and weak. First, anomalous verbs. These verbs show many irregularities and tend to be old verbs. They are sometimes called basic verbs because they are fundamental components of the language. Some of them are historically blend of 2 or more different Germanic verbs. Second is preterite present verb. Preterite present verb, some Germanic verbs underwent a shift, whereby their strong preterite tense forms become reinterpreted their present tense forms. New weak endings were then used to be forms the new preterite tense. The tense of this verb therefore resemble the preterite terms forms of strong verbs below. Many of the preterite present verbs are important as modal verbs of auxiliary verbs. Third is strong verbs. Germanic strong verbs Verbs are known as strong, which form their retard tenses by means of a change in the stem vowel, I and E, by a blot. Many of these changes still exist in modern English, reflected in verbs such as a sing, past tense sang, past participle song. Last is weak verbs. Germanic weak verbs. Weak verbs are predictable. They form their preterite tense by adding D in the singular and don in the plural. This is the root of the common English past tense suffix ed. Weak verbs are often form nouns or are in the general newer word.